We call this meeting of the Normandy School Board to order. For those of you who are connected with us virtual, we ask that your indulgence and apologies because as usual, traffic in St. Louis doesn't always cooperate with us. So we were waiting to get a quorum in the room. So we now have a quorum and we're ready to proceed. At this point, Alex, would you do a roll call attendance, please?
Mr. Humphrey?
Present.
Ms. Williams? Here. Mr. Jones? Here. Ms. Foster? Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum. Shall we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, as we began to go into the agenda, the first thing I wanted to do is just take a quick stop at the 2.01, which is board operations. To remind you, Mike, you're on the radar for the training, so that 18.5 hours of training. I just got a note this week that they're looking for you to get locked in on that, and then I'll also convey the same message to Valerie Patton as well when I talk to her. The other thing that I did want to make the board aware and the community at large, one of the things that I wanted to make sure we had clarity as we were moving forward on the election of local control. And so basically what's going to happen is, excuse me, April 5th, the election happens. April the 12th, which is the board meeting following the election, those results will come back to be certified by the board. And the individuals that are the top two receivers of votes will actually be sworn in at that meeting. I did have an occasion to talk to both Sarah Foster and Mike Jones after having consulted with school board legal, DESE general counsel, and the commissioner of the state, that what will happen is that once the election has happened, that both Mike and Sarah will remain on the board as board members, but they will be non-voting members. So from between April through June, we will actually have a 9-person board. So I just want to make sure that we have that in the record, and that those that are online will actually understand that. And so we'll navigate through that process as we get to it, but that's where we are. Yes, ma'am.
Am I here? Thanks.
What was your question?
Well, what will be a quorum? Are we still looking
Okay.
at 4? Do we, since they're non-voting?
You'll have a 9-person board, but you only have 7 voting members, so the quorum will still remain.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
The 2 remaining individuals, you might want to adjust it because it's actually almost taking your head off. Bring your camera, your whole computer forward.
Like that? Okay. There you
All
go.
right. I guess I need to. Okay, we're now at 3.01, which is public recognition. Do we have anyone for public recognition?
Yes, we do, Mr. Humphrey.
Okay, if we don't.
We do. Can you hear me?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we only have one person that we're recognizing, so this will be a short report. Good evening to the members of the board, Mr. Robinson, community members, families, and students and staff. Tonight, we're recognizing Dr. Crystal Hunter. Dr. Hunter has been selected for the St. Louis Early Childhood Regional Hub for Missouri. Dr. Hunter, along with this group, will serve as a liaison for Missouri's new Office of Early Childhood at DESE. As a leadership team, the hub will help with new early childhood education initiatives for the St. Louis area, as well as lifting any concerns or needs to DESE for early childhood from our region. Dr. Hunter, as you know, is the Director of Early Learning for the Normandy Schools Collaborative. Congratulations, Dr. Hunter. And that concludes my report.
And thank you very much for that report. And for Dr. Hunter, we appreciate the work that you're doing in early childhood, and we laud those the recognition that you have, and we look forward to the work that you're going to do in the future. At this point, we're at 4.01, which is the adoption of the agenda. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
It's been, who had the motion? Mike, can I get a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Sheila Williams. All those in favor? Aye. At this point, the agenda has been adopted. 5.01, superintendent update.
Good evening, board members and Normandy community. Tonight, you'll hear several presentations on some very important issues that I think we'll need to tackle this spring. Director Foster asked in a previous meeting about our MAP scores in comparison to the rest of the county. We're prepared to have some discussion on that. Ms. Marsh will then follow Mr. Miller, bringing us an update on attendance, not just our data, but our strategy. We will hear very briefly again from Mr. Miller about the scorecard, talk about the reorganization of CASA, which is an extremely serious issue where we'll need board input and vision. And, finally, for the next few months, we want to dwell on the type of progress we need to make at the high school. As you know, for the last year and a half, we focused pretty exclusively on elementary, K-8 mathematics, K-8 English language arts, and we need to start to move the needle on our high school. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So let's start with Mr. Miller and MAP comparisons cross county.
Okay, good evening, board. It's a pleasure to be here. And the last time when we were discussing the newly released MAP scores. Thank you. Ms. Foster had a fabulous question, just a rough idea of how the districts around us did. So we just have a short report, and it's not this one. It was actually clicking the link of the, click right there for us. So, yeah. And if you can just click the tab on the bottom that says doc form, I think it's maybe a little easier to see. And you can scroll down just a little bit. So the thing that we did, just so I can explain the graph while you guys are kind of looking at it. Obviously Normandy, we are on the red. And this is a graph where being shorter is actually better. So this was every single county school district had a decrease in MAP scores. So everybody in the entire county did go down in MAP scores by varying degrees. And so you can see county-wise, we are a little bit better than the average, kind of right in the middle. And if you go ahead and you kind of scroll down a little bit more, I think it shows the ranking here. If you scroll. So Normandy is in yellow for people that can see. And as you can tell, while we did go down, and that's never ideal, we didn't experience near the hit that other districts around us. So we wanted to look at everybody in the county and just have like a rough idea, but we also wanted to look at our near neighbors. Districts with similar demographics. And as you can see, compared to all of the districts that touch us, we actually decreased much less than the districts around us. So academically, while it's never ideal to go down, it was at least promising to see that we did not academically drop as significantly as the districts around us. Any questions about the specifics or how it was calculated?
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I got it. Getting ready to leave and finally got it right.
You get all your training in too.
Say what?
Get all your training in before you leave too.
I just got one comment, and this is from a culture standpoint, and I appreciate what you were trying to do with the comparison, but the reality is not good enough is not good enough. Going down is going down. And rather than contextualize that about there were people in the race slower than us, the fact that everybody didn't do it, that's just the fact. And then we have to build off of that, because for me, and I know that was not your intent, but for me, it kind of contextualizes or accommodates not doing well enough for the standard that you set for yourself. And so the question is, how do we get back up there? Not that there were other people whose decline was percentage-wise more than ours. And that's my only comment about it generally.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. I think it was just kind of I know Ms. Foster just asked for some data, and so we just wanted to present with all the public record data around this.
And I would say I asked the question not to say it was good enough, because obviously it's not good when any child goes backwards. But I think that what I wanted to understand was what happened during the course of the pandemic. We know that distance learning is not ideal for any child. And to the degree that we are just looking at ourselves compared to ourselves is certainly one thing, but with MAP scores, with everything, we always look at ourselves in comparison to others. So I think it's important to understand that while we dropped and we were already low, understanding that we did not drop as much as some other districts, again, who were much higher than us. And so what it gets to their, actual MAP score now, is another point to take up. But I think that we can't ignore what COVID did to our student population and I don't just mean Normandy. I mean, the children are not all right. When you take a look at this data and you see it dropping, it's not as though Normandy was the only district struggling to fight through the pandemic. That's my point.
And that would be what I agree with 100%, that what COVID did was impactful across districts, and the relative decline relative to one another is really irrelevant to the point that you just made.
Right, and I think part of the conversation as we look at the data, we know before COVID, we already had student learning loss, some students year 2 or more behind in their academics. We know we had some loss concerning COVID. We had some learning loss because of absenteeism, students and teachers relative to COVID. So I think the conversation for us going forward is to take a look at how do we disaggregate our data to understand where our kids are as we go through our assessments, whether or not it's the spring or fall, and begin to start building a program that moves us towards a path of continuous improvement and growth. That's what we need to be. So I think going forward, the fact this snapshot says everybody did bad. I got that. So, but for us, it means how do we craft our processes and our structures so we can begin to show the kind of growth that we know our children need and that we can deliver for them. So I think that's the real conversation that we need to have. So, and I know that.
I also think that we have to acknowledge the teachers and leaders who in the midst of a global pandemic moved heaven and earth to keep our kids from sliding faster than they would have slid otherwise. We were the lowest performing school district in the state. And so for us not to have seen the hit that some other school districts have seen, especially when we were in the midst of a whole new adoption of literacy curriculum, we had teachers who were going over and beyond the call of duty to reach kids, get materials to their homes, get devices to them. Food service jumped in, security jumped in. Crystal and her team put together really weird kind of map configurations to get kids into school because we were forced by density to bring kids into the building to actually do those administrations. And for a school district that struggled with attendance, we got enough participation in math such that we didn't have to come back and do it in the fall. So this is not satisfactory by any stretch of the imagination, but I think there is still an untold story of the adults who really work their heads off to try to keep this from being a slide all the way to the bottom.
Well, it's the adults, it's the leaders in the school, so all of the teachers, but it's the parents and the kids who worked really hard through this too. But it was an absolute change in the middle of total chaos.
Sure.
So I think it should be viewed as such, and that we did a yeoman's job of making the numbers that we did, while not acceptable in the long run.
Thank you, sir. Yep. Ms. Miller will be back in a second. We'd like to hear from Ms. Marsh relative to our district attendance, not just the data, but some of our initiatives and how we're going to try to rethink some of this for second semester.
Good evening, members. How are you?
Doing well and yourself?
Fantastic. So I want to talk about attendance. We all know what attendance is for Normandy, right? But one of the things that you guys have empowered us to do is to really focus and do a deep dive into attendance, as we did. We created the new attendance plan that has been disseminated to all of our schools. Our schools have been very focused on making sure that they are following this plan and really examining attendance as a whole. We have attendance clerks now at every school. We have a couple that are absent or that we need to fill those positions, but we now have attendance clerks, and their sole responsibility is to focus on attendance for the school. We've even looked at some of the challenges that we're having. Do we have that one up? The slide is up. Okay, fantastic. The slide is up currently on the screen. It gives you an idea of where our 90/90 is currently with the district. We've got some challenges ahead of us. However, the superintendent has led us to look at what are some of the causes of our attendance issues. So we looked at attendance, pulling out all the children in discipline. If there were discipline issues, we found that that was a very slight number, 10% or less, where that affected our attendance. So it really wasn't the discipline. We also pulled out, because we can only look at kids that are quarantined, we pulled out all of the kids that have been quarantined because we can't code them COVID. We can code them in our system as quarantine. We pulled those students out as well. That was only a 1% change in our district. So now we're trying to figure out why our kids aren't coming to school. We do have a large number of students and parents that have applied for MOCAP, which is the ability to go virtual. We're looking at that number and then some other outlying issues that could be the problem. Our next step is to pull a group together to look at how many absences kids have according to the highest number, which our students currently can miss 15 days of school before they're considered dropout. We're going to start from 14 down, and we're going to look at exactly knocking on doors, visiting school, visiting homes, calling, email, and put together like a serious package that is examining what the issue is. The other thing is, on some of our mayors within the 24-1, they have ordinances on their books where they can potentially help us support that attendance piece, because it could be considered dropout or
Parent neglect.
Thank you. And so right now my team is looking at all of those different municipalities to see which ones have those ordinances on their books, and so that we can engage those mayoral offices to assist us with some of this attendance. But our babies are not coming to school. Our parents are afraid of COVID, and they are holding children home. We've had people parents just now applying for MOCAP that have had their kids home all semester. And not even informed the school that their children were not coming back. So that we also have a lot of kids that have moved potentially to other districts. Even though our numbers are a little higher than we expected, we still have to find these babies that are not here. So next steps, we're going to do the number backwards, find out where the kids are, the 24-1 on the books, and we're going to start providing a monthly report to the board of directors on where we're at in attendance for the district. Is there any questions?
Yeah, the one question I have as I look at attendance data, I guess, is there any way to open this whole screen up? Because I'm only seeing part, I'm seeing half of the, well, I know that there was one slide right above it that actually talked about the number of kids that are enrolled in the district. I think 2956 or something like that was the number.
Correct.
And what would be helpful when we look at the 90/90 attendance and you have those percentages, I think it's important to have the N next to that percentage to be able to show, okay, at that particular school, you have 300 kids. And right now we have X number in attendance. So we know exactly how many kids, because right now the percentages are helpful, but I'd have to go back and do the math to figure it out. So I'm just saying, going forward, let's give us the percentage, total number of kids in the school. Well, the goal is 90/90, total number in the school, total number that are present. And then we have this number that we're trying to figure out how to get them back in. So I think the more clarity we have around that number, then we're all communicating, because I'm sure everybody's heard me say this more than once. Kids can't learn when they're not at school.
Right.
And so we got to figure out how to get them into school, because I think looking at this number, what is it, the high school, is that 34 point?
34.
That's like right at about a third of the kids. And
So if you click on, and for the sake of time, I'll just do this really quick, and we can go into this at another time. If you click on each of these tabs at the bottom, they actually go into those numbers. But because we've not shared this completely out yet with the whole district, we wanted to just give you a quick snapshot. But each of these actually break down at every school, ages, grades, as well as, and please don't scroll up at the bottom, there's even the names of the students, how close they are to 90/90, what it would take to get them to 90/90, how many days they've met as well. So because this data was created, we're able to look at it very much every day to see what kids are not coming to school, because this is coming straight from K-12. One of the other things, we were concerned about attendance being taken. And so what we did is we are now daily checking to make sure that each teacher has inputted attendance daily. And so we can actually see at 9:30, Vanessa takes attendance to make sure that all of our teachers have inputted attendance. And then we take it again at 4 in case there's someone who hasn't. And what we're finding is our teachers are doing a great job at making sure attendance is in. So we're looking at all of these different areas. But this data right here, I think, is what you're asking for. And offline, maybe we can have a separate conversation about it. But it actually goes, if you scroll down, but because kids' names are there, we can't scroll down. It gives us that information that you're requesting. Yeah, we'll email the spreadsheet to you, but it actually breaks down the student, the days, the percentages, what we need to do to get them closer, all this information. And this information is in our K-12 system.
right, and I do appreciate it. I can tell from the numbers that a lot of work went into it. And I think I would say, as a board member, and I would hope my colleagues would agree with me, that this is a critical enough issue that we need to visit it every month.
Guaranteed.
Because we got to be able to see the kind of movement that we need to have. And once we understand the strategies, if we need to make whoever needs to make phone calls, we can make phone calls to anywhere. We can pull together. We just got to find kids.
And let me say that Dr. Floyd and Andrew Miller helped put this together for us to make sure that we're gathering accurate information. So they are making sure that I'm empowered with the tools I need to follow up.
And I can appreciate it because it does appear to be a very accurate baseline. And so we just got it. Now it's time to go to work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I
Sarah, go ahead.
tried.
Go ahead, Sarah. You got questions.
Okay, so how is the state going to evaluate attendance at schools? And again, not that this is good, but I'm assuming other districts have a challenge with attendance in this environment. And there must be an approach that the state's talking about, whether it's MAP, whether it's attendance, but there's the pandemic impact on everything. And how will they even begin to evaluate us for accreditation purposes in the long run?
Well, I would say that I think that's being considered on a state level. However, Craig Larson has been talking to us as a district on the things that we need to address to make sure that we're doing what we need to do. And I think at a state level, they're having those conversations because there is no change. When we had kids virtually, they got 94% as long as they did their work. But if they didn't come to any class, then it went down to, I forgot what the percentage was. There's no caveat for that this year. It is strictly 90/90, whether you're virtual or not. So because we're not virtual. So we've not heard from a state level yet what they're changing or what they're going to consider in this process, unless Crystal or Andrew or anyone wants to speak on that. But I do know the conversation has began, and Craig Larson has been working with us to make sure that we're starting to examine that. He works very closely with Michelle Gaskin and student data, as well as he's afforded us different opportunities to work with folks at the state to make sure that our data is correct, so that when they come in, they can see we're taking the steps to assure our kids are at school, but we can't make up for the fact that some parents are just not comfortable sending their
Well,
students.
right. But we also had to purchase an additional software program to try to mitigate the whole attendance thing so we could bring kids to school even when our teachers were out. And so we're doing the best we can to, I guess, create the environment so that the kids can come to school and we can still deal with the staffing shortages and we can still teach. So, and I don't know what other districts have taken that step, but we made that decision as a board to do that. But it just feels like it's a very unsteady playing field right now. And do we, I don't know, Marcus, do you know when we might have answers?
The easy answer is nothing at this juncture. We still haven't gotten M6 yet to be able to see, where some of the points are going to fall, although we know that attendance is going to be a big part of that. Relative to exceptions for attendance or clock hours, everyone is concerned about that across the state, especially as we think about inclement weather potentially coming next week, and people have already burned some. Was it next week, 2 weeks from now?
And next Thursday, 4 inches possibly.
But as we've already burned 3 of our 4 snow days, that's a big concern for us. And so I think it's going to be a meeting or 2 beyond now before the state board really considers what, if any, changes or exceptions or exemptions it's going to make. One of the things that occurred to me is in tightening up our attendance systems, we've really clamped down on accountability for taking attendance, because we had places in which we did not have accurate attendance across our school district. And so it could be that our attendance was inflated before now, and we're seeing something that already existed. In my mind, we've got 2 issues. Issue number 1 is we have some continuum of kids who feel like I don't have to come to school. They're probably older kids who are comfortable staying at home, skipping being truant. And the county won't get involved until 15 days. And even then, they're still not going to get involved. You can make the report, but the chances of them actually acting on that report are slim and none. Then I think there are another group of folks who are legitimately terrified of their kids going into a school building and potentially being affected by this dreaded disease. And we've got to do a better job of getting past rumor, conjecture, not just getting folks information, but access to quality health care such that they feel comfortable sending their kids back to school. And so the data is just one thing. At this point, now it's time for us to roll up our sleeves and spend some shoe leather. We gotta go knock doors, we gotta go sit in living rooms, we gotta stand on porches, and we have to figure out what it's going to take for our folks to feel comfortable with their kids. The other issue I put on the table, which is an ancillary issue but connected, is the sense that this is the same as last year, which is to say a lot of people were given grace and mercy from an academic standpoint in the previous school year. Low-level participation still led to academic promotion. And so one of the things that we're gonna have to clarify for our families is you can't just sit around and pass. That there are real consequences for not doing the work, whether you're virtual or you're in person. And so that's one of the things that we're gonna need to clarify very quickly. So I appreciate Regina and her team and all the other folks for pulling the data together. Now it's time to get real active.
Okay.
Yeah, Sarah, just to your point about the accreditation issue. And I haven't talked to anybody, but haven't spent a fair amount of time up in that space. I would argue that there's a good possibility that the state board will not try to make any judgments on evaluating district performance in this environment because of literally the instability over the last couple of years. Doesn't allow you to make comparative analysis. And basically the judgment on accreditation is based on a standard that was constant, how well did you do from year to year? And it's a lot like when the legislature kept changing the evaluation system. You basically created a situation where there's no way to equitably make a judgment about how well is somebody doing, because you have no comparative basis. So I would, unless things have radically changed since I've been gone, I would, I've been in enough of those conversations, and that level of consistency and maintaining an integrity about the situation. Now, if you're not accredited, you're still, everybody's gonna kind of be in stasis till we can figure out what the new normal and the new stable is to measure from. I would suggest that that's probably what's going to happen.
I just don't know. I mean, we don't know when they're going to take it up. We don't know when they're going to address it. So it's okay with the state board that everyone's in limbo?
Well, what I would say, a lot of times, you can anticipate whether or not the state board is going to make a policy ruling, but I'm of the opinion you operate as though that change is not going to come. Because if they decide not to make any kind of concessions around COVID, we still have a duty to get kids in school. And so
Absolutely, we have a duty to do that.
And generally, while I know we're looking at 90-90 as the goal, Marcus, he knows on many occasions, I've told him the only number that's important to me is 100, because we need to figure, that other 10 out of every 100, they deserve an education too. So we got to figure out how to touch all 2,956 to find out what the issue is. And, because that's the only way we're going to move the needle. Yeah, so I do appreciate the work you're getting ready to do, because I know it's going to be a lot.
I do have a question though. As you're going deeper into this, will you be kind of categorizing the reasons why kids are not coming? Because I'm interested in what are the other reasons that
are you looking for trends?
Number
like
so
trends.
Chronic, this is a chronic number, and so yeah, COVID has something to do with it, but it is a chronic number. So the real question is, and once you eliminated, like it was interesting, you eliminated suspension and you eliminated something else, and they were really non-factors in the numbers. So I would, I think it's important to find what these other mitigating circumstances are that no matter what grade level you're looking at, we're seeing this underperformance in attendance. So,
or Dr. Douglas, for instance, to give you an example of that, I'm sure she's seen this because I've heard it from a parent. She has a high schooler that never went back to school because they had a job and was making more money. Well, now the middle schooler is staying home and taking care of the little kids and not coming to school. And mom is saying, I just found out this today, mom is saying it's all because of COVID, but in reality, it's so when we do this deep intervention and we knock on these doors, we're going to learn a lot more than what we live. And that's what you're asking for. So I think through the monthly report, I'll be able to report actually other trends. As President Humphrey said, I can find other trends that are potentially happening with our students.
And I guess one question I want to ask, I'll get you in a minute, Sheila. The one question I want to ask the board, I had suggested monthly feedback. Is that a good timing for you, or do you need to have feedback in a different timing? I suggested monthly.
I think at this level, quarterly makes more. If I was operational, I'd want to see it monthly, but here I would argue quarterly, because I would want to know what the trend is, and I can't pick up a trend from month to month. But if you actually have responsible for the work, you need to know how well you're doing every day. But I think we would need to know, okay, are we getting better, or are we getting worse? Have we been stable? And that takes at least a quarter to make a judgment.
And I guess the question is, do we need to wait 3 months to find out if we're doing better or worse? That was the only reason why I suggested monthly.
I recommend monthly, just because there's seasonality to this. There are all sorts of issues that come into play. There's seasonality to everything. And so you've got the pandemic, you've got other issues, but when it's colder, kids stay home more. When it's, you know, I mean, they're just things that we will see, and you got to compare that month year over year too. I mean, so.
Right, that's another way to look
Yeah.
at it, right.
So I think monthly is good. And you're gonna have it anyway. You're
Well, you'll
tracking
have this
it.
dashboard also, that will
Yeah.
also, you'll be able to, it updates itself daily, so you'll also have access to this. I can provide.
I
a
guarantee you, we're
report.
gonna ask a question more
Yeah,
than
I can-
quarterly, so.
Yeah, so I can provide an update, maybe not as in depth, but I can definitely provide a monthly update.
But then for comparative purposes, I like what you just said. If we're
Year over
gonna
year.
look month to month, then
Same
we need to
month
go
last year,
back
yeah.
to see how we're doing year to year relative to that month. And
Even though 2020 won't help us
yeah,
at all.
right. Or go to 2019 and
Yeah.
make that your base
You
year.
look at a normal year and remember the good
2018,
times.
really, you'd have to go to last 18, 19, last time you had a constant year. But to make some kind of comparative analysis, we need, you know, a longer window and at least some stability to compare it to. And that's the only reason I was saying quarterly, but if we do some kind of contextual thing from month to month, that will get the same job done.
Well, Andrew and I have already had that conversation because as the superintendent alluded to, and after talking to our student, we are finding that we're not quite sure that attendance has been taken for the last few years, that it's even been taken accurately. So we will compare, right? Because, you know, we can, but we also are finding through our student system that we might have not been taking accurate attendance, and it might have been conflated or inflated in the process as well. But we will make sure we do that. Ms. Williams?
Yeah, I was gonna say a couple of things. One is, no, I'm unmuted. I think I did, yeah, I did it right.
I just didn't have it asking
I'm
that.
telling you, but thank you for it too. I want to comment first of all on the presentation. As soon as you said causes, that opens a whole new door. The fact that you're addressing things because we make assumptions about why things happen. You're going after the real underlying reasons is extremely important. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that you'd already done the deep dive that Mr. Humphrey was asking for. Now, whatever the data we get it's just for our information anyway. What are we going to do with it? That was my question. It would be interesting, but are the decisions we're going to make based upon that information? That I'm just asking the other board members that. But the only information I would like, because sometimes boards have a habit of asking for information just for them, just for our own interest. So however you're collecting the data, whatever you're looking at month to month is what we need to see. Okay?
Yeah.
I don't want to, and that's just me talking, I don't want a report developed just for this board.
No, don't
Okay.
create anything new. You know, one of the things I would say is that when it comes to attendance, in my opinion, it's an adult issue. So we got to really communicate with the parents, because a lot of times the elementary level up to certain grade levels, they're not making those at least it didn't happen like that in my house. So we just need to understand what the adults are saying about why their children are not at school.
Yes, sir. I'll leave it there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're past the point of running reports and analyzing spreadsheets. And this next phase of attendance really is about how we do our fact finding, and that's from house to house. As you might remember, we did increase our staff pretty significantly, adding attendance clerks at every building. That wasn't just for record keeping. That is the point person who puts together the attendance team, that is supposed to go from house to house. And so we have a format by which we engage school counselors, our school security folks, our social workers, to be actually able to go from home to home to figure out what these issues are. So that's the place I think you have to hold us accountable. What are you finding as you go from place to place? And if all we can tell you is this number of people haven't returned our phone calls, or we're getting this number of emails back, we're not doing our job. And so we increased our workforce in an effort to be able to have real touch and real contact. And that's the point of accountability for us going forward. Are there any questions on attendance, Mr. Miller?
Can you go to the next couple slides for us? So the next one, so here is just the monthly dashboard. The idea is to give everybody one more slide, and if you click it, it gives, nope, the next slide. There we go, the scorecard. So this gives board members just a high level overview of finance, human resources, achievement, attendance. And then later as well, you can see it breaks down by school. So just kind of a monthly update, that way you know how we are faring in all of the areas. So just quick organization from the different departments. Yep. And I know, obviously the map scores are from last year. We haven't taken the map yet. So all this will be updated when it's done, and we can talk about forecasting if we want to for future guesses, but I think that's pretty much it. Are there any specific questions about this or anything that, yeah?
When I looked around the in-school suspension, or is that out of school?
Those are out of
Number
school,
14.
out of school suspension
Okay, so that's
days.
out of school suspension, and
Mhm.
is this year to date?
This is year to date. This is
Okay.
as of Monday, the total number of out of school suspension days assigned.
So we're on track to having maybe an increase of 20% or so by the end of the school year.
Correct.
Out of school suspension.
Correct.
To what do you attribute that?
That's not.
20 months of sitting at home. 20 months of sitting at home.
And so we've got, I think, a very special responsibility that goes beyond just reorienting kids to rules and consequences. We've got to rebuild relationships and community with folks who've been out of fellowship with us for almost 2 years. And so some of the behaviors, as some of you know from sitting on these appeals committees, are really disturbing behaviors. And so if it were happening in maybe your basement, maybe it's not so disturbing if it's horseplay. But when it happens in a third grade classroom, it's a whole different matter. And so I believe our buildings are working though on trying to build in through our deans and our principals a different reason for kids to come to school and be connected.
What role does the culture playbook play in kind of bringing about the circumstances, the environment that might impact these numbers?
I think the culture playbook is a start, because ultimately what it starts to say is there are cultural systems we ought to adhere to every day. Kids know how to enter the space. They know how to go to the cafeteria. We have systems around how we do the business of the classroom. That's not the same thing as building relationships. And so our kids are out of fellowship with us, and not just us, it's folks across the nations. As kids have returned to suburban schools, I haven't heard from as many of my private school colleagues about some of these very disturbing issues, but let's be clear, their kids weren't at home for 20 months. They had fellowship opportunities and small groups and places to convene. When my nephew couldn't make it to MICDS, he had the opportunity to go work out at the gym with one of his classmates whose dad had a big gym in his office. And so under the circumstances, I think we have to really focus on how we connect with our kids and their families so that they're connected to us in a way that they're responsive. Right now, I think we've struggled with responsiveness, especially in places where we've had long-term substitute teachers.
And one last thing, okay, the staffing levels. I noticed 99, 98, so forth and so on. Now, those percentages in previous years, those were filled classrooms, or were those certified teachers?
Field classrooms.
Okay, and now we have about 10% of classrooms that are unfilled.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
And we continue to work through that issue. As you know, we've established our own fellowship in an effort to help people transition into the profession and become appropriately licensed.
yeah,
But it's a struggle.
thank you.
Mike, you had a
Thanks, sir.
question? You're on mute. You're also on mute.
Okay. You kind of alluded to something that I just want to ask your opinion about, and how you might think it's impacting some things we see. And that is, school is also part of a socialization process. Okay, I mean, we place a lot of emphasis on academics and that kind of stuff and performance, but it's the soft skills of learning to be a human being and how to function in community with other human beings. A large part of that, at least historically, was a function of school. I mean, this in the process of going to school.
Right.
And it just occurred to me that a lot of our academic challenges seem to be also related to the fact that over time, not period Normandy, but it just seems to be over time, that emphasis on the socialization of what happens to children in school, or historically did. We don't do that anymore.
Sure.
And how big an impact, you know, I mean, I'm asking you with no point, but you know, I'm not gonna hold you to the answer either, but how big an impact do you think that has on our inability to get higher levels of academic performance?
You know, I think with our staff, I'm a broken record on this. Culture comes before curriculum.
Okay.
And so, you know, we had some kids who went home at the end of February in their 8th grade year and came back to school sophomores. How they relate within the high school context is different. And although we did spend some time, I think an incredible amount of time, talking to our staff across the district around the need for home training, orientation, induction to get kids ready for the learning experience. And we probably ran too fast to academics and did not spend enough time in any of our buildings, building in a certain conscientiousness about who you are, what you bring to the table, what does productivity look like, what does it mean to be well behaved, how do we hold you accountable for that? Now, I don't think we were the only school district to do that. But
I don't either. So I was asking as a more generic question,
Sure.
not necessarily normal.
But I think we were anxious. And look, the other part about it is the kids were gone for 20 months, but the teachers were without kids for 20 months. And so the level of fatigue that we saw in the fall was uncommon. For folks to say, it's September and I'm already exhausted. Well, the emotional pull that when you go from a screen and nobody else in the room to now 22 actors in the room doing their own thing, popping up in and out of chairs, when you haven't experienced that for almost 2 years, is significant as well. And so I'm not convinced that we did an adequate job of preparing our staff members for what it meant to come back into a space where your school is fully subscribed, kids are there every day, parents are presenting particular challenges. And so the emotional impact on staff, I don't think is well considered. And we tried to do some things in the fall to pump people up and to make them feel encouraged. But the reality of the matter is, it was like going back to your first year of teaching.
Well, and as you were talking, it occurred to me that that also could be an issue in attendance, because there was a time once, in a galaxy far, far away a long time ago, kids who were not interested in the academics of school came to school
Sure.
for the socialization process. The
That's right.
reason you didn't not go to school is because everybody you knew was already at school. So fundamentally, there were things that were going on that had ultimately academic benefit just because there was a socialization, at least an attraction socially for being in the building. And we've seen, I don't mean us at Normandy, but we've seen to have lost that aspect somewhere along the way. And I was just curious, you're thinking about how big an impact do you think that has on our failure to get the kind of academic results we want?
I think it's absolutely critical. It's one of the things, that type of mindset shift as well from a different perspective. And we'll talk about this next month, this whole question of student productivity, the sense that, people think that academically we're a soft touch. If I sit around long enough, then somebody will hand me a diploma and send me on my way. As we've dug into the systems around that, we found very disturbing things about what kids haven't been expected to do academically, which has depressed some academic performance. And so changing their minds, not just about how to conduct myself, but why even come to school in the first place? Like, drop off your homework, actually study for the quiz. Like, those are things that we have to actually build into how we train and orient our kids to be in our schools, because based on previous experience, they hadn't been expected to do that. What does it mean to pass? What does it mean to be a junior? How do I earn that? What's the accountability around that?
It kind of begs the conversation as well when you gave the example where you had a kid that was in the 8th grade and then they ended up in the 10th grade. So the question is, how do we structure the academic support, the emotional support to bridge the gap for those 2 years? Because I think that's important for us to have that conversation about, because they showed up almost 2 years later. What are we doing differently, to address that need? So I think that's a future conversation, but it's a conversation that we need to have.
We want to start it tonight. Can you give me a slide?
Okay.
And so we had an RSIT visit in November that talked specifically about challenges that we were having at the high school. Mr. Humphrey asked me to opine on what the right thing was for the high school. And I really think it's too big of an issue to try to confront in one meeting. And so our hope is to kind of lay out that there are a multiplicity of challenges relative to our high school program, and get your feedback as we try to walk through that. So this particular meeting, there are 4 challenges. 1, academics, what our kids are doing to progress toward a diploma. 2nd is attendance and productivity. You've seen 35% attendance. We've talked about the credit tsunami. Next month, we'll have more detail relative to what it means for kids to work and what they are accountable for. 3rd is culture. What does it mean to conduct yourself well in that environment? And 4th is operations. We have to find a way to still do school even as we're trying to reinvent the high school. And so when we run into challenges around structural steel or the cost of lumber or delays in permits or flooring, all of that affects the operations of the school, because it means that's a day longer we're not delivering the academic space back to the team at the high school. And so how they have made it this far, I think, is remarkable. Starting the school year with no cafeteria, I think is just fantastic. How they go forward will be important. Let's talk academics for a second. We have tremendous issues around credit challenges. Almost half of our kids in our high school are undercredited. Am I saying that right, Dr. Douglas?
48% of our sophomores and juniors, 39% of our seniors, and probably about 38% of our freshmen are already in.
That's not one answer. That's about 10 answers to what we need to do to resolve that issue. We'll be back next month to talk about how that credit recovery task force is meeting that need to help our kids gain as many credits as they possibly can. We did discover, I shouldn't say we, like Dr. Douglas didn't discover this herself, that there's documented credit inflation in the past, where students were being given credits for passing quizzes that they had been given the answers to. And so under the circumstances, as we start to talk about these structures, it's not just about how do we give kids the opportunity to attain the credit, it's about how do we transform their mindsets around granting that credit at all. And one of those things I think that will be helpful to us is this notion of social promotion. Certainly the state keeps us on the hook for a 4-year graduation rate, and they should, but we shouldn't feel a pressure to try to push a kid out 4 years by hook or crook. If that's what they want, we ought to provide them with the opportunity for that. But we ought not be cheating the system or cheating that child by putting them out into society before they have actually earned all their credits. So that is academic issue number one. Academic issue number two is curricular. I'm going to save that conversation because I think at the board level, we need to really figure out what our capstone program looks like. We've talked to you in the past about an early college program. That's tough. Some people said, and I think rightly so. How do you go from lowest performing school district in the state to require college courses of every high school student? I swallow that, but we still have to set the bar somewhere, right? And so the revitalization of the curriculum is called for by the November RSIP visit, I think is waiting on us to make decisions about what is the top math class we will require every Normandy student to take, what is the top English class, and we can then reform the curriculum from there. Staffing continues to be an issue. Whether we do early college or not, if we're going to be appropriately staffed at our high school, we're going to have to go out and find people and train them for our classrooms. Right now, we have one person with a science license, not including Dr. Stockton.
Yeah,
Yes. And so
in high school,
yes. And so finding the right staff in those departments to teach those courses is not just going to be about signing bonuses, which are illegal. Won't be about our salary schedule. It'll be about our ability to identify some folks and help them see their lives as teachers. I'm gonna talk a little bit about our graduation requirements. And so this is just a part of what high school revitalization is going to have to look like if we're going to get ourselves to accreditation. Remember that a great deal of our points, no matter how you slice up MSIP, are going to be sitting at the high school. And so I don't think we've squandered a 1.5 years focusing on foundational math and English, because the reality is if a child shows up at our high school, or really any high school in the county, without foundational math and English skills, they're done for. Because no high school is staffed for remediation of basic skills in math and basic skills in reading. So that work, I think, is critically important. As long as we hold our elementary kid, middle school kids accountable, then we'll see some growth and progress. However, we still need to set a high bar. It doesn't have to be early college, it could be AP, it could be International Baccalaureate. We still have to set a high bar for high school students to hit if we expect them to be ready for post-secondary success, however we codify that, whether it's college or career. Connected to the high school is a reorganization of the CASA program. Dr. Douglas? I'm sorry, were there any questions about academic challenges at the high school before we come back next month? Any challenges to us to bring you different data?
Well, I think the only question, when you talked about having the board to weigh in on whatever that capstone program is. My suggestion is that you bring forth the recommendation of what you think it should look like and allow us to lean in and weigh on it. Just bring that to us
Next month.
next month, and that way we can take a closer look at what you're talking about.
Yes, sir. Dr. Douglas?
Good evening.
Good evening.
So, I don't know how many of you guys are aware, but we had a pretty serious safety issue occur at CASA about a week and a half ago. I've been getting reports. I've been going over to visit. Dustin's been going over to visit. We had students out of uniform. I reiterated, students need to be in uniform. Students need to be on task doing work. Students weren't on task doing the work. We were doing the research, finding out what kids were doing. Kids weren't doing a lot of things. I had already shrunk the program down and cut off the funnel to the amount of students that were going over to CASA just because they were overaged and undercredited. So with that being said, we had some more issues happen. The serious safety issue involved weapons with loaded clips, and it also included enough drugs for distribution. So we needed to reorganize CASA. When I looked at those photos of those guns and that kids had tried to hide them by putting them in nearby yards, we had to do something. So I called the superintendent. Not only was the data bad, but now the safety is out the door. So I called Superintendent Robinson and we talked about what the reorganization would look like of CASA. And so when he asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, I cannot run everything at the high school with the team that we have here, with the shoestring team that we have because of people being out, and manage that too. So we need to look at a couple things. We need to look at kids who are making growth and doing well. We also had some kids who were repeat offenders who were already virtual. And then we needed to look at a new way to reach students who had been at CASA for several years, but still had not made any progress. So I had students who've been at CASA for 2 or 3 years and still have 0.5 credits, right? So we need another intervention. So we reviewed all of the data, what their current placement was. We reviewed how their progress has been, how their behavior has been, what got them to CASA in the first place. Dustin took a deep dive, Lisa took a deep dive into the information that we could see, who were the kids that we wanted to target. Like, who were the kids that we could get over the hump and get graduated this year, or get them graduated by June if we allowed them to come back, if they had not been involved in next slide. In serious, there we go. So students who had not been involved in serious fights, weapons, drugs, what could we do for those kids? So the reason for the changes were the safety concerns, the increased enrollment. We also had a problem with SSD supports for students who need services. They didn't have enough staff to support them. The lack of academic progress and those challenges, attendance. We had a lot of kids who were not showing up for school, weapons, drugs, and communication challenges. And we had little to no staff that is trained in true alternative education pedagogy. And that's a specific kind of niche in the education world where you need those special skills to really support those kids. So again, we reviewed the data. And so we looked at the SSD students. One of the problems I had coming in was that the SSD students had been placed over there without really going through their due process based on what's in their IEPs. And so some of those kids slipped through the cracks. So we changed their placement without their due process that's allowed to them through their special education status. Students, the grade versus the credits, semester progress on coursework, we looked at that. Past discipline and current discipline. So we had students over there in the alternative program that were still causing problems at the alternative school. So what we did logistically, we wanted to bring them back on campus. Now I have to tell you, we have no space at the high school. When the state comes in, the people from from DESE come in to help and support the high school, like I'll just come in, they're camped out in my office, like and there's no space that is not being used. So they're there. So Dustin got right on the line with Randy and Phil, and we had a space that had, the abatement had been done, but we hadn't started using that space up on the 3rd floor. So after we narrowed down our different silos of these kids go here, these kids go here, we have been working with Regina Marsh to get kids on launch so that there would be a little bit more accountability where they were looking at a teacher every day because they're just virtual on their own hadn't worked, working with counselors. So this whole plan, those 3 days, those 3 snow days were a blessing because we had the opportunity to make phone calls. My team really pulled it together, worked with Sarah to try to make those things. So we were able to absorb 3 of the teachers into the high school faculty. Launch, right, so Launch. So Launch is a virtual learning platform. Can they hear me? It's a virtual learning platform that we started with putting our MOCAP kids on. That's just parents that have requested virtual learning. However, we've learned that this platform is actually preferred by the state. And so we started using it for our discipline students that have long-term or short-term suspension as a virtual option for our students to participate in. And so that's what she's right. So it's going to give kids more accountability than what they're having just with the virtual. So we were able to absorb 3 of their teachers into open high school positions, and we had done some of that back at the start of the school year. So there's additional staff, additional supports. Our special needs students have access to more staff from SSD to support them in the building. We shortened the day for CASA students so that they would be there for a period of time, not mixed in with the milieu, but they would have the opportunity to be checked by our security officers and our security staff to make sure we're making sure that staff and students are all safe. Okay. So at CASA right now, we serve students with discipline issues, students who need a smaller environment, and those who are overaged and undercredited. And so one of the things that we really need to do is determine what our alternative program is going to be and what we want it to look like. This was a quick fix Band-Aid because we had to do something quickly, but we really need to.
So if we could like rewind the tape a few years, CASA was a response to a need to come up with an alternative setting for Normandy High School. The problem that is created is there are 2 types of alternative schools, a type 1 alternative school and a type 2 alternative school. A type 1 alternative school you might recognize more closely as a magnet school. Kids organized around STEAM, kids organized around the arts, kids organized around business or the health professions. It's a type 1 alternative school. So the hope is if you draw kids in based on their interest or their individual proclivities and how they learn, they'll be more focused and they'll be more committed to the learning situation. The type 2 alternative school was conceived as a place to deal with kids who were struggling socially, behaviorally, emotionally within the context of a broader school. And so generally we don't talk about those as much. These are the programs and the places that are hidden. And so our type 2 alternative program started at our high school on our campus in North as an effort to try to deal with type 2 alternative kids. For some reason, it became type 2 kids with behavior issues and type 1 kids who either needed a smaller environment or kids who were in need of some serious kind of credit acquisition. It got blended. Once we moved it off site to the Thomas More campus, nobody tried to untangle that web. And so here you have kids with the most significant behavior struggles in the district, kind of partnered up with some of the kids who are really the most timid kids we have in the district who are struggling to get out of a big monolithic high school. All that being said, CASA was probably doomed from failure from the very beginning, just because it was not very concentrated in terms of how it was conceived and who it was serving. All that being said, we had to press pause on the St. Thomas More site when it got to the point where it's just too dangerous to be even doing this work. We have kids in a more controlled setting. We feel good that we're going to make sure that our kids are safe. But that doesn't, in my mind, get us to a point where we've actually made an active decision around what type of model CASA is supposed to be. I will say that a number of school districts around the country have moved to something that is more individualized learning. I think of the Summit platform out of Seattle, where kids are really moving at their own pace, making it through the curriculum toward a high school diploma. That is a type 2 alternative that we've seen work in some spaces. There's some type 1 alternatives where kids do internships in addition to traditional classes, and they take those intern hours and turn them into credits and help them toward graduation. We've got to come up with a different vision for what this is. And so next month, we will commit to the high school having a proposal relative to graduation requirements and rigor at the high school. They should also have a proposal relative to, a reflection on how they are encountering the credit tsunami to help kids build those credits back. I'm going to ask you to give me April, though, to have more targeted conversations around what is the greatest need within our district relative to an alternative placement. Is it behavior? Is it kids who need a smaller environment? Do we need a place where you do credit recovery? My sense is, given the number of kids, no, you don't. We need to do that at the high school. And so what questions are there about CASA and the way forward with relative to alternative learning?
Sarah, any questions?
Well, I have lots of questions, but I don't know that we've got the answers yet.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of just the future alternatives, how this went this bad, over what time period it went bad, who's been leading it that should have alerted us to, there's just so many questions because it's a terrible situation.
Yeah, my understanding is CASA is an outgrowth of programming from our student services department in an effort to honestly and legitimately try to help some of the kids with the greatest struggle in our district. Older kids with severe behavior issues who just can't be in a traditional school environment. That morphed somehow, right? When we said, okay, well, not only should they go to CASA, but here's some other kids who can go to CASA. Here's some other kids who can go to CASA. It was led from the very beginning by, to Dr. Douglas's point, someone not trained as a type 1 or type 2 alternative educator. And so under the circumstances, the systems and the controls that needed to be brought to the table, like nobody raised a red flag. And so once that person departed to join a charter school community, we brought over our most seasoned assistant principal in an effort to try to give us some analysis, not necessarily revitalize the program, wasn't his experience either, but give us some analysis around what's broken here. And there was really just too much brokenness.
And so if we've had kids at CASA who were dangerous, some who were timid, some who were just trying to get their credit in shape, where did the dangerous kids go? Have we identified all the dangerous kids? Which kids went to the high school? How were they dispersed? What are the numbers around some of that? And how does that then disrupt the current high school situation?
So
I mean, we heard that there's not enough room there.
Right. So part of the analysis was who ought to be considered for some type of modified alternative placement versus who's going to be better off in a setting where they're working virtually to obtain their credits. And
so the dangerous kids went where?
Some of them went home.
For good? Or just virtual learning?
Only you can say for good, but yes, at least temporarily.
For the kids who were repeat offenders, absolutely. we had to do something different.
Kids who were dealing drugs or grabbing guns.
Those kids, it became a police matter. So our police handled those matters, and those students, will be adjudicated, however. But for us, they go through our process again, paperwork is done, they go through the process again, and then we make another determination as to how to continue or discontinue. Yeah. And they're on virtual learning.
Okay. And so how many kids went to the high school?
So
How many kids did you
So
absorb?
at the high
Thompson?
school, we currently have 18 students that have transferred from the CASA that was currently there out of the 81 that were present. Out of those 19 that came back, those were students that either received services through Normandy and special school district, came back after having conversations with families. Some families actually elected to say, could we please have our students still stay virtual instead of going back to the high school?
right, we reconvene case conferences basically to help them.
So we should
So I got
say,
18 went
we
to the
should
high
say
school.
about the 80 kids who were at CASA, only about 30 of those kids were in attendance on a daily basis. The rest of those kids were learning virtually with support from the CASA staff. So of those about 30 that were attending in person, 18 were back in the building.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
It kind of seems to me.
Your microphone's muted.
Okay. That I'm going to suggest something that can't happen because we're in St. Louis. But if you kind of look at the city school, St. Louis Public, it gets overwhelmed because of its size, the diversity and size. And the question is the kind of capacity you need to handle that many kids. As I've processed our issue, it seems, I would argue that we have the problem of not being big enough.
Right.
And that I have to imagine that not only Normandy, but Jennings, University City, I mean, if you took the districts that are all geographically kind of connected to each other, you can make that as many or as few as you want. It would seem to me that probably, and they share a demographic, so they probably share a whole set of the exact same problems, more or less. And I would think that some kind of collaborative effort, and I'm thinking about the special school districts, that if everybody had, the special school district, if everybody had to do their own special ed in St. Louis County, in 23 districts, we wouldn't have special education. We wouldn't have any special education that probably worked anywhere. Now, I'm not an expert on special education, and I'm not going to opine on how good the job that they're doing, because that's not the point I'm trying to raise. But by collaborating and creating that for their special needs kids, they create enough capacity and expertise that they can deal collectively with something that we would fail individually, miserably, if everybody was trying to do it. And it would seem to me we're talking about similarly situated students, okay? Students who are alienated for whatever the reason of alienation, and I'm not talking about the causes, but just the reality, and this is the situation. And I would argue that it's beyond any district, at least the size of ours, to come up with solutions that can effectively deal with that, just because it's a capacity issue. How do you do it? How many people do I have? And to do it well, they got to be dedicated staff focused on that. And this is outside of the norm of our operation. Okay, that we, and until we can start to
think about things in those kind of terms, you know, we're almost like the dog chasing its tail. I mean, we keep circling, we're putting in the effort, but it just seemed to me that structurally we haven't defined the problem correctly, and it's beyond the ability of one 3,000 student school district to solve comprehensively for these kids across, and until we get enough at a critical mass and enough resources going at it. I don't know, does that make any sense?
I think it makes a ton of sense. And I think there are examples across the country of type 2 alternative co-ops that basically have come together between small districts to say, when we have kids who are inappropriate in the school environment, all 5 of us send them to this one location that we can adequately staff amongst the 5 districts versus trying to do it with one district, which is kind of how we found ourselves in this situation. Because this one district will have things that fall through the cracks until there's an explosive issue. In this case, it was, we had 11 special ed kids who weren't being attended to because somebody changed their placement without a case conference. Well, once we started digging into the fix for that, now we've got 4 or 5 more fixes and 2 loaded weapons and a brick of marijuana. So under the circumstances, it would make a lot more sense to have a centralized location where multiple school districts could build a program together.
It probably made too much sense to happen, so I'm not.
It could happen.
Huh?
It could happen. We don't have space for it. You know, for good, bad, or indifferent, we sold off our surplus buildings in the transition from Normandy School District to Normandy Schools Collaborative. And so where we used to have tons of square footage, we no longer have that. But somebody, to your point, does have square footage and could really contemplate making this work.
Okay.
That's all I have, sir.
All right, well, at this point, the next item on the, we're down to items for consent. And before we vote on that, I would ask for a motion under policy 6.10. There is a policy GBCBA that in talking to Sheila Williams, she's asked that we would pull that one from the list because they need to do some further review and study on that. So I would ask for a motion to remove that particular policy from the list. That's GBCBA. So can I get a motion to remove that policy? Okay, Sarah moved it, Sheila second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that at this point now, we're dealing with the consent agenda. We have a number of items there. I would ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda as outlined.
So moved.
Second.
It's been probably moved in second that the consent agenda would be approved. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor? Anyone contrary? Okay, the motion passes. We're now down to 8.01, which is the monthly financial update.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're going to talk about, give a little bit of an update on the finance property over in high school. We're going to talk about contingency funds and the changes to contingency funds for Prop V and ESSER funding as a source of that. We're going to add one update to the redistricting map presentation that I gave to you last month. We'll talk about the annual budget process and an update on calendar hours. And let's hope that there is not snow next week. I hope it doesn't come. Just as you can see on the map, we have a lot of work happening with Prop V, and our goal is to make Normandy High School's facilities upgraded and updated to provide world-class educational facilities for our students there. One of the main things we're doing is adding the secure campus connector, and what that does is it displaces our bus lot. So that's where we place our buses. There's the picture of the current bus lot. Buses are out. And that's what it's going to look like when the secure connector is done. So we need to find a new place for our buses. Right now, they are parked on the staff and student parking, and it's not ideal.
So one of the ways, this has been in our plan since the beginning, but I want to give you an update on it. What we plan to do is acquire property just on Lulu, adjacent to our bus depot. 5 properties from the LCRA, the Land Use Reauthorization Authority from the county, and some through the city of Wellston. Here's a map that shows those properties, parcels that we are seeking. And here's a map, an overlay of what the bus lot would look like. North Hall is where the current bus depot is, so it'd be super convenient to have that space there. We're going to put in some nice fencing. We're also going to have cameras installed, and this is going to be kind of a win-win with I met with the City Council of Wellston and the LCRA. We believe that this can help deter some of the illegal dumping that was in the news about 9 months ago that was occurring over there. We'll have staff members there all day. The district will, of course, pay for demolition and remediation and abatement. We'll make it look aesthetically positive. Our security staff will be regularly there, and we'll have security cameras as well. I'm meeting with the LCRA board next Wednesday this has kind of been a 9-month meeting. Marcus and I started meeting with them back in May, and through another general counsel later, we do feel like we're really close to the finish line. They have given us authorization to begin surveying and geotechnical work there, and we've started that. At the same time, the city of Wellston is happy about this, and they are finalizing steps with the Recorder of Deeds office to acquire those properties and then work out a transfer to us. So stay tuned for the documents related to that, but I wanted to give you guys an update on that. Let's take a look at funding sources. Last time we talked, I think we talked about selecting our general contractor for east and central renovations, and the bids were high. We talked about another district where the bid was almost 40 million over what they had expected, and ours was about 5 million. We were able to have on bid day the reduction come down $1 million, and then we've identified some value engineering collaboratively with KAI and DRI to shave off another $500,000 or so. So we're looking better, but we did need to reshuffle our sources of funds. So DESE has approved additional ESSER funds because we're expanding the number of learning spaces for our students, increasing social distancing. We're also protecting the building envelope, doing a lot of good things for students in the environment there. And we also looked at how we can use some additional capital funds next year when we set the tax rate in September. So the bottom line is it's 43.5 is our total sources of funds. And on the next page, we look at our contingency and projected costs, and that's about 43.4. So we're able to provide funding to continue moving forward with Prop B. As I mentioned in our last meeting, there are additional ways to secure additional funding, but we feel like the major bid items are out of the way. Now we just hope that there's not major unforeseen circumstances as the general contractors get into East Hall, particularly being an old building, old big building. Another thing I brought to you last January was 3 different scenarios of what redistricting might look like if the board approves next month the decision to move back to a middle school model. The different scenarios had different kind of competing core values. One of the core values is it provides the least amount of disruption to families. Another core value is it maintains the logic of neighborhoods. And a third is the greatest equity among schools for percent of capacity. That means the buildings are basically as equally full as they can be. So there's less chance of any one building becoming crowded. I had sought feedback from principals and cabinet and received some feedback, but Andrew Miller, who you saw, gave some more specific feedback. Having been the middle school principal in the past, he looked at one section of the map and saw that there's a neighborhood that is part Pagedale, part Normandy, where the students will be going to Belmore. And his recommendation is we look at it where maybe they go to a school that's closer, and you can see that Washington is there. So our consultants have redrawn and created a 4th option where those students go to Washington, which appears to be the closest school for them. And it has the continuity and logic of neighborhoods, and it also is pretty solid in terms of the equity among schools per percent of capacity. So once, if we get to that point, we have another option to bring to the table. Looking ahead real quick, let you know Dr. Floyd is leading community input and staff input in the very near future to inform like a presentation that will come before the board and information that's coming. And then at the next meeting in March, the board is slated to consider that recommendation on the conversion to Lucas, the conversion of Lucas to a middle school. And if the board decides to proceed with that, then subsequently we would ask the board to make a selection or recommendation for which boundary map to proceed with for next year. So just wanted to kind of make sure you can see ahead of you that this is something coming down the pipe, and be aware of that. Each year we have input on, there's just a couple more items. Each year we have input on how do we generate our budget. You guys look at that last in June, but it starts as early as December when the cabinet begins thinking about the big budget priorities for next year. How do they align with our strategic priorities? January or February, we send that out to department heads, principals, and cabinet members as well to think strategically about next year. What are their big needs? And there's a process where they submit that to us. Cabinet reviews it. Ultimately, the superintendent and I kind of go back and forth and we look at what are the biggest priorities. And I listen for what the superintendent is recommending we look at for next year. This year, there's an option for us to have a budget workshop for the board. I remember at our June meeting, I got a little bit of feedback saying that could be helpful if we met in May to kind of knock some of that out. So you're not talking about it as much in June. So I'll look for guidance on that and whether we want to schedule that or not. But I wanted to put before you the budget process. Finally, we're getting close on AMI days. It looks like as soon as we approve the purchase of the Edgenuity program to ensure that our students had quality learning system, even though we were short-staffed. At that point, it seems as though Omicron really turned the corner, and we had we actually had no call-offs since then, or no need to move to remote learning. So things have been going the right direction with that. Just letting you know that at the very beginning, the board and the committee approved a calendar that had 1,089 hours. We have had some cancellations. We had those Thanksgiving cancellations for wellness, just like many other districts. And then we had 3 snow days last week. That brings us down to 1,053 hours. And we need to have 1,044 before we have to have school after Memorial Day. So basically we can have 1 more snow day or 2 Friday snow days and still hit that number before we have to go over. There's been some different chatter, and we've reached out to our staff and community about AMI and had some forums with them as well. So I wanted you to be on the same page as well for where we are on that. At this time, are there any questions?
Yeah, I guess one question I had, when we're looking at, whether or not we exhaust those days.
As you look at the available days, has there been any consideration to actually taking one of the Friday PD days and making it an instructional day, as possibly maybe alternating PD days because every Friday has been a PD day, and if you need to get to 1,044, if you have to, that's there's a potential place to look. Sarah, did you have any questions? Sheila, any questions?
Yeah, I just got a comment on the middle school process. I think that's a big deal. I think it was a big deal when the board changed a couple of years ago. I think it's a big deal. We're considering changing it back. I don't think we ought to make a decision like that, like this is the normal course of business. And I would highly recommend that if that's the staff recommendation, and heard the answer dialogue, and I understand the middle school argument versus and the impact of it. And I think those educational arguments need to be heard by the public and parents, teachers, and then the board should make a decision. I think it would be a big mistake for us to say, well, we had a meeting and some folks showed up, the staff led it, and then we make a big change like this and people hear about it afterwards. So ultimately, we're charged with the decision, but I think we need to hear from the public in a specific, not necessarily at a board meeting. I'm arguing on this one that the board hold a hearing on this, and the staff or whoever can make the case and talk about what it means to do it, what it means not to do it, so that all of that gets vetted and people can give their opinion, and the board still has to make a decision. So this is not, doing a straw poll, but it is having enough of a democratic, transparent process that people say, I heard the argument, I understood it, I agree or I don't agree, but I don't have a problem with how they made the decision, even if I disagree with the decision that they were making. I think is in maintaining a relationship with the community. I think that's what you always owe as an elected body. You don't owe people, I'll do it the way you want it, but you do owe people the opportunity for them to weigh in before you decide, and you have the ability to consider their input as you ultimately had to make your decision. So I would pull that schedule, and I would, and in point of fact, although I might not be a voting member by the time we get to it, but I would.
That's why you better vote tonight.
Yeah. But no, I mean, what I'm saying is I would, even if I thought it was a good idea, I couldn't vote for it using the process that we have outlined.
Right.
And that's literally what I'm saying. That in this one, the process is as important as the decision.
I wanted to ask.
Sheila, go ahead.
Yeah, when I've heard several times now that you had parents and principals, you've talked to principals and so forth. I'd like some information on what has already been asked, going back to what you're saying. What has been asked? What were the answers? To whom were the questions given? Okay. So that I have some idea of the research you've already done. Okay. Thank you. I mean, if that's okay with the board.
Yeah,
I can't request that unless.
Well, and I think it's appropriate because I think as we have that conversation, I think it's important for us to really understand as much as we can about how we move to the elemental model and what worked, what didn't work, and what would cause us, what are the compelling arguments that would cause us to, to potentially go in a different direction. Right. So I think we need to frame all of that so that we have clarity around what it is that we know that will inform that decision. So I agree with Mike. I agree with everything that's been said. So we just need to frame that and figure out how we're going to move that train forward. Construction update, is that where you're at now?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening. Thanks for having me back again. I'm Marcus Mummy with KI. With me tonight is Mike Kennedy, our CEO. I'll give you a quick update on Prop V projects. Once I remember how to use Phil's computer. West Hall, quick update on West. We have made significant progress finally on the Culinary Classrooms. We got the change order resolved. and the contractor is due to give us a completion schedule this week. So we'll know the timing on those last couple of rooms being turned over. That's the Culinary Classroom, which is the commercial style training room and the classroom associated with that. We did have the kitchen completely open and full use on January 17th. They cooked their first hot meal finally. We are still working on the north wall. The design's complete. We're getting pricing this week from our contractor for the changed design to solve the connection between central and north, or between central and west. Culinary Arts, like I said, the intention is to complete that by mid-March. And we're still cleaning up some West Hall punch list items around the student use of those spaces.
What were the Culinary Arts off 2 months?
What
Are you supposed to deliver by the end of January?
Well, we never really had a good schedule from the contractor, so we haven't had a reliable date. They're due to give us a schedule this week. I do have these report cards in here for each contract. I won't spend any time on them, but they're presented each month. You're welcome to look at those. If you have questions, let me know. The connector is the next project to discuss. That's the project Phil just mentioned, right where the bus lot used to be. The big item for that recently was the rerouting of the dual temperature loop that runs around the campus. It was in the footprint of the new building, so it had to be rerouted. And that happened over a weekend. It drifted into the week a little bit. The kids were pretty tolerant of the temperatures. The staff did a great job keeping the spaces as warm as possible. There were some hiccups with how it all happened, but we got it back up and running middle of the following week. We are excavating the footprint for the connector. I think it's about 50% excavated. The soils we're pulling out are wetter than expected. So we're having to jostle around and bring in some gravel fill. It's not conducive weather, obviously, to drying out soil. We also tore off a portion of East Hall, which was a small wing to the library, the former library. And we are over there doing some underpinning of those foundations. Here's some images of that underground loop system. This is how the whole campus is heated and cooled. Depending on the season, there's either hot water or cold water in these pipes, and they go to the HVAC systems to keep the buildings comfortable. So it's now rerouted outside the building footprint. This is some of the excavation. We did find a lot of debris. It was noted that there was a former pool structure, building with a pool in it in this area. We did find a lot of debris and the foundations from that old building, and so that's all been hauled off. Here's the section of the old library that's been removed. It's got some temporary barriers up to keep weather out. Again, these scorecards on the contractors, if you want to look at them in more detail. The next upcoming contracts on the connector really relate to some of the finishes, office area furniture and public area furniture, and the design team is moving forward with those items. I think the group has taken a tour of a facility and they're reviewing samples of furniture. Moving on to Central and East, and this is the one that we brought to you during a special called meeting in January, where we approved Lawler construction. Just to recap that a little bit, we received the bids in the middle of January. We issued a letter of intent and had our special called meeting on the 25th. We are going through, as Phil mentioned, ongoing value engineering, trying to find ways to save additional funds to try to get closer to our budget target. And then also working with the design team to finalize design on some significant owner allowances. The East Hall abatement was completed during this time, and that contractor has demobilized. We imagine we will find additional areas during the course of construction that they'll need to come back for, but the majority of the work is done now. They are on call to come back for Central when that project initiates, so we will be seeing them again. Some images from that. This is some scaffolding on the stage area to get to the asbestos abatement in the ceiling of that area. And here's the crew and some of their containment throughout the hallways. Normandy School staff has been through to clean out IT items and any items they want to salvage in the last week or so. So Lawler is ready to start in the coming weeks with demolition. We're under contract with them now. We're under contract with Train. And the last item then is the media center and public area furniture for the connector, which may actually be grouped in with connector furniture. The schedule hasn't changed since the last discussions we had. We are looking closely at the strategy for ensuring the school has enough classrooms to reopen in the summer. So we'll be watching the schedule on East Hall very closely to make sure we don't put ourselves in a position that we don't have enough classrooms come August. Brief update on the overall project utilization of the Prop B projects. This is a summary spreadsheet. I'll go through some of the notes here. On the business utilization side, we've contracted through the contractors $4.16 million of work through these minority-owned businesses. Your goal is 25%. We're currently at 29.58%. And on the women-owned businesses side, we're currently contracted with woman-owned firms for $685,000, and that's 4.86 compared to your 5% goal. So on the business utilization side, we're close to goals with the intention of continuing to work to improve those. On workforce utilization, our minority workforce hours are at 4,941. That represents about 20.86% of the total hours. Female workforces have only 274 hours. That's a little more than 1%. Your goal is a 35% combined workforce. We're at 22.01. I wanted to look at that in comparison to other projects. Most of you are probably familiar with the $1.7 billion project at the NGA expansion downtown. That's the 100-acre site north of the old Pruago complex. They released some statistics last October in an article in the Construction Forum. Their goal is lower than ours, similar to ours. They're currently tracking an 18% minority workforce and a 5.7% female workforce, which takes them at 23.7% combined. So comparably, we're similar. We are still working to improve our numbers as well. So that's the end of my update. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right, thank you. At this point, we're at 9.01, which is our indoor quality improvement plan.
Okay, if you'd like the short answer, Ron said we're good, so I'm just kidding. We met with Ron today. Marcus, Randy Shipley, Regina, and I met with Ron this afternoon, and we went through in detail the kind of the whole body of work that Train is presenting to us, and Scott from Train is on the call if there's questions. What I recall Ron saying in the meeting today was, I really wanted Normandy. We recognize that Train was selected through a competitive public bidding process as our ESCO back in the 17-18 school year. But when they do that, they can just kind of hire their own subs because that's what we've done it, and that's the way they do it. But we want to do it a little different. We want to make sure that we are as transparent as we can be in our selection of minority and women-owned businesses who serve as subcontractors putting in this work. He said he wanted to go, what I recall him saying is he wanted to go on the record to make sure that we're doing the best we can. So in September, the board approved a process whereby Train works collaboratively with the district in a sense to mirror KAI's process in managing and selecting and recruiting and doing outreach to MBE and WBE businesses. The board approved that in September. In October, there was a letter of intent that the board approved that using that process. And so that letter of intent is really what this item is about. But then in January, Ron said, hold on, not so fast. Let's sit down and talk about this. Let me make sure I get some more information. So we talked about the outreach, and today we talked about the outreach and recruitment. And in the meeting, I recall Ron said, what we'd like is a transparent way to show the selection of the contractors, very much like the way we select contractors for our bid work. So we have it all public bid. That's what was missing from Train, and later this afternoon after our meeting, Train sent that over. So my recommendation, I'll go through the presentation in a minute. My recommendation for the motion would be that to approve this as presented pending satisfactory submission of transparent documents describing the bids, the bid selection process. We can work on that when we get to it, but that, what I understand, that's what what was needed. So I'll ask Regina and Marcus to correct me if they understood differently.
In their normal business practice, how do they? In their normal business practice, how do they normally acquire subs?
Scott, I'd invite you to respond to that.
Can everybody hear me?
Go ahead, turn the volume up. Hold on one second. Okay.
So the statutes in Missouri allow the selection of an energy services company for professional services and construction management based on a competitive RFP process. That's how Normandy selected Train as their energy services company. From there, we develop projects and we go through a competitive process. The difference is that since we're a private company, we evaluate, we issue an RFP, evaluate proposals, and select the most qualified bid based on schedule, resources, budget, et cetera, to meet our commitment and guarantee a certain level of performance back to the district. So it's very similar. It's just not the public record, although we've been open and transparent and provided that information to Phil this afternoon.
But okay, I think I heard the guts up. At least I hope I did. But it would seem to me, I mean, just from a business standpoint, that if I were a contractor or anybody that had to form out parts of stuff that I did, that I would have, I don't want to call it a stable, but at least a list of folks that I have a relationship with that I have confidence in their ability to do what I want them to do. And they may compete with each other in the sense that I'll say to William or Marcus, hey, I got a job coming up. I need a number from you. I need a number from you. But in the normal course of my business, I'm gonna be doing business with both of you. So one gets it one time, one gets it the other. And the reason we create these public processes is because minority contractors are not in the relationship part of the business. So I'm not even knocking the relationship, because you pick who you know and who you're comfortable with, who you have confidence in. That's human nature. The real question is, how do you get other people to have the same opportunity? So if it were me, if I was a private company and you asked me how I picked up my subs, I'd tell you, I pick up the telephone. Okay. And I say, Sarah, I need a number. Okay. Here's the deal. And, you know, first of all, are you available? If you are available, here's when it's coming up. I need a number. And I also call Shield. Okay. So because all of us do a business together, and that's just the normal course of how business works. So I would presume Ron's concern is that as we're spending money consistently over time and we pick
a sole source prime, how do we ensure that minority and women-owned businesses have an opportunity to do business with us? Because it's really not doing business with the prime, it's doing business with us. Am I understanding this correct?
Yes, and I think we've, to that end, it's a
Thank you
fair
for saying it
question.
in a much better way. Except the subs do business with the contractor, and then the contractor does business
Yeah,
with train.
but ultimately, everybody's doing business with the owner.
Right.
Okay, so if I'm, I would put it like this. The prime is like the head coach.
Right.
But whoever's project it is, the owner of the project, like the owner of the team. And ultimately, I'm gonna let you coach the team, but it's still my team. So the reality is you get chance to influence that. So I'm presuming, and since I'm not kept up with this, I wasn't here when it started, I'm just trying to pick up what I heard you say. And that's the problem that appears to be the problem he's solving for. And that is who's on the list that gets called for the opportunity to do the subcontract work that I would have as a prime. And you've already picked me, and all of that's at my discretion, and we're trying to figure out how to influence that, correct?
I think you're very close, and especially with regard to how can we mirror KAI's process and our process with public bid as much as possible, which.
Well, I think, you know what, I think don't make it too hard. Just be the owner of the project. Okay, I mean, it's your money, it's your project. Okay,
But that's why you're setting goals, and that's why you're making them reach out to companies they don't normally do business with. That's the whole point of this, right?
Right.
Okay.
So,
Making them, they've got to proactively.
See, I don't have any problem saying as a condition of doing business with me. My contract with you requires A, B, C as a condition of doing business with me. Now you get to decide if my terms are acceptable. You know, if they ain't, don't do business with me, and I'll find somebody else. But as you know, when it's your money and you're in charge, you don't have to beg anybody to solicit any damn thing. You get a chance to dictate how you would like your business to proceed.
Right.
So,
And you can solicit that, but
right.
You may not get the firm that you want because they're not available.
Right.
Or because the prices are so much higher.
Exactly.
Because they actually don't want the business, so they're gonna price themselves right out of it, so they're not selected. So there's a lot of reasons why, even though they solicit a multitude of companies, minority and women-owned companies, in addition to all of the people they have relationships
but
with.
what we're really talking about is being in the rotation. Because fundamentally, the assumption is if you're on the list and in the rotation, you'll get an opportunity as a function.
And I think what they're trying to do is get away from a rotation so that there are constantly new vendors being asked to the table.
But I don't, well, you know, the other side of that is in any business, and depending on what level of capacity that you need, there's not an unlimited number. I would argue there's not an unlimited number of folks to go to. There's going to be a fixed number that are.
But so what's the argument? What are we trying
Well,
to
I mean,
do?
I just want to make sure I understood what they were trying to get done. I was just trying to simplify the language.
Well, that was really simple. No.
Well, you know, I think as you listen to the conversation, what it really boils down to is that you have someone that's going to do some work, and that you want to make sure that there is a transparent bid selection process for the folks that are coming in as subcontractors, so that various players on the MBE, WBE list and disabled, as it were, are actually part of the workforce that's doing the work. That's what I hear.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the team today, just to support Phil's presentation, the team today discussed creating a policy, the board creating a policy about MBE and WBE policies, so that we also have a policy, of which we say, Mr. Jones, in place to support these decisions.
And I would suggest that, you know, anytime you end up in a business dispute, your lawyer always asks you, what does the contract say? Not what your policy is, what does the contract say? So I would suggest that if that's the policy direction we're going, and just as a business practice, the contract language ought to, in some shape, form, or fashion, reflect the policy, because then at that point, you now have an enforceable business agreement, as opposed to, I got a policy, and but it's not reflected in the contract.
Does Bill get to present to us now? Does Bill get to present to us now? Okay. He was going over a few things I can't get to listen.
Yeah, and so the current slide shows the number of firms that Train reached out to, subs, via their contractors, primarily electrical and mechanical are the spaces that they were looking at. We clarified this afternoon that every M or WBE firm is considered certified through the big four primary ways of certification, the airport, MoDOT, IDOT, or the SLDC. This is the document that Train sent this afternoon. It's just a part of it. It's actually on a long legal size piece of paper that the board has.
That's hard to read.
Yeah, it's hard to read, but let's just look at the far left side. There are 3 primary bidders for mechanical, 4 qualified primary bidders for electrical. And what Train did is for each of the 9 projects on this $5 million plan to improve indoor air quality for children and staff in the district. For each of these 9 projects, each of them was bid out by the contractors. Both, and what they did, they showed their total proposal, the bond amount, and then also the MBE and WBE percentages. So this is just the first 2 projects, 2 items at Jefferson. By the way, you need to know, though, that Jefferson at this time has no mechanical ventilation during the heating season except for opening the windows. We know we really need external air to come in, and that's just not happening. So underneath this discussion is also the real, is concurrent with it, is the needs of our children and staff to have improved indoor air quality here. So that's kind of the root of what we're doing. Is making things better. In addition, the cooling tower at Lucas Crossing is 200% overloaded right now. It's not as structurally sound as we want it to be. That's another major piece. The gym at Washington doesn't have AC, and it doesn't have outside air coming in. We need to have outside air coming in, not just for COVID prevention, but for just overall good health. But back to this. You look and see this extends with the 4 electrical bidders and the 3 mechanical bidders offering their total price and their MBE and WBE participation for each of the 9 projects. The next slide shows the final, the total all projects. Neuter had 1.1 million in subcontract in work that was going out to subs, and they were the low bid, and they had strong WBE, MBE numbers, and Guarantee Electric was the low bid for electrical. This is what they sent us, Scott sent us after we met with Ron, and this, what we're going to do, what I propose we do as a next step is we bring all of Train's documents to Ron. They actually sent about a dozen other documents that show all the bid docs, but I didn't print out all those for you. And we'll talk to Ron about those and look at the satisfactoriness level of them. In summary, Train is under contract with 30% or pending the board's approval, 30% MDE businesses and 4% WBE businesses. Drain's committed. These next slides just show how much money is spent for each of the projects.
Bill, did Guarantee not submit their percentages? They're all blank on this long sheet.
Scott, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, Guarantee submitted their percentages as well. They committed to, it might have been blank for that one particular ECM, Sarah, but there's, I'm hearing a lot of feedback and echo, but there is, they submitted their breakdown as well.
Because what?
They submitted the breakdown as well.
It's just not on here. It's not on the spreadsheet.
No.
Can you hear me?
Too many
Bad
microphones
echo.
on.
Scott, it's not on the spreadsheet. It just is blank for Guarantee. So again, I would ask that the board consider that Ron be the determiner of satisfactory, transparent, public documents that we can post to this document that it's approved pending the receipt of that. Because Scott, it looks blank on there for Guarantee.
Can you show me what you're looking at, please?
Train is striving for 35% field improvement,
Mute.
Employment.
field employment in minorities and or women for this project. They'll use certified payroll records, and the number will fluctuate as you saw with KAI. They're going to do the best they can. There's some information about Train's commitment to diversity as well. In summary, we believe this is what is a good thing for kids. If there is a delay, we believe we've taken steps to push Train to make very public and transparent subcontractor selection that meets or approaches our policy directed goals for MDE, WBE participation. And Train is doing this and recommend that pending receipt of adequate, transparent documents that this item be approved.
So we need a motion.
Okay, so.
Well, don't you have to ask for?
Okay, now, just for clarification's sake, share with the board what you would like the motion to be.
I think you just said it. So I move. You second?
Okay. Once again, I'm not clear what the motion is, so if you restate it for me so I can understand.
Approve the purchase as presented of Train Amendment 8A pending satisfactory receipt of transparent documents describing the MBE, WBE subcontractor selection process as verified by Ron.
Okay, so we do have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on that motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody contrary? Okay, at this point, we're now at 10.0.
Don't want to belabor this, but these are fairly large contractors using their subs. Okay, I'm recognizing some of the names. These are not two guys at a truck coming in fixing a thermostat or something like that. So it's these subs.
Turn your mic on, you're muted.
Okay. These subs are going to be these are going to be the subs that have to go find minority subs then, or is that not necessarily?
No, the long list with a lot of names on it.
Yeah, I saw that one, yeah.
Those are the minority subs that will be doing work. The shorter list, neuter and guarantee, those are the contractors, those are the general contractors who will be employing the subs to do on that long list.
Okay, I was just trying to get the relationship between the short list and the long list, okay.
Okay. At this point, we're at 10.01 board comments. Do you have any board comments or anything?
I would just say I continue to be amazed at the challenges that the students, the staff, and the teachers face. And I want to compliment everyone for your hard work. And I mean, it just is never ending, and you're in a tough environment. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for doing the job, and thank you for helping make us a better district.
Sheila, any comments or questions or comments? Mike, anything?
I agree with Ms. Foster. I was muted.
Okay, all right.
I'll co-sign that as well. And I would say, just in passing, don't overstress yourself trying to correct this historic kind of place that we're in, and it is overwhelming. And that at a certain point, do the best you can and kind of go with the flow, and we try to figure it out whenever we get on the other side of whatever this is.
Right, and sir, I did all your comments as well. And thank you to administration for all the work that you've done. And at this point, can I get a motion we want to get a motion to go into executive session for personnel, real estate, and legal. By roll call vote, Sarah?
Yes.
Sheila?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
William, yes. We're now in executive session. We're going to take a 5-minute recess.